Good morning. This is Norma Cowie with Norma's Talks. Hard to believe it's another Wednesday already. I was thinking about what to speak about today. Almost as I end last week, I began thinking about this week. And one of the elements that I really thought about was based on a question somebody had asked me during the week, was to talk once more about how important the past lives that we've had and how they affect us now. Now, in 2009, I guess, I wrote this little book called Many Lives, Many Ways of Remembering Them. I think it was the last kind of one little booklet I put together. And so I ended up taking a look at it, and it was kind of fun to reread some of the things I wrote, because I remember wanting to write a past life regression or a past life book. And I could never figure out how to start it. It just wouldn't start. And then actually what was happening, I was flying to Regina to do some work. And I was in the Kelowna airport, and all of a sudden it hit me on what I could do. And I went and bought a notebook and a pen and sat there, and I wrote in the airport. I wrote on the plane. And that was the beginning of this little booklet. But one part of it was, and I'm just going to refer to that, is becoming aware of how a past life can affect this one. And I'm just going to read a little bit of this, and then I'll explain a little bit more what the story was. And I've written down here, San Francisco was where I first became aware of how an unresolved past life can have an impact on this life. Every time I went there, I felt unsettled. I was fine in the valley, or if I went over the Golden Gate Bridge north of the city, but as soon as I was in the city itself, I had a disquieting feeling inside. Then in 1987, I had to spend a week in the city. And that's because I was a part of the producers of the Psychic ESP Fair. We were taking to the big city to a big show down there. And no sooner had I checked into my hotel room than my unsettled feeling began. And as I had employees with me and exhibitors depending on me, I knew I needed to do something about this unsettled feeling. And it kept growing in magnitude with every hour. So after spending a restless night, I took time for myself and did a past life regression. When I came to San Francisco, I was already an accomplished past life regressionist and was used to doing past life regressions on myself. It was quite natural to do the relaxing exercise and then ask to see the life behind the unsettled feeling. What occurred during this past life regression surprised me, and most importantly, released the nervous tension from that day forth. I am able to be in San Francisco with ease. The life which unfolded was as follows. I was a stockily built Russian seaman. My boat was docked in San Francisco in 1906. While it was being unloaded, I was on shore leave, exploring the city, which seemed to be filled with activity, when the earthquake and resulting fire happened. I was caught up in the mayhem and never made it back to the boat. As I did the releasing of fear from this sailor's life, connecting him to the light, and then releasing the fear from myself in this life, the unsettled feeling was gone. I was free to enjoy the beauty of this beautiful city, which I have from that day forth. Many years later, in 2002, as I approached Paris, France for the first time, I had a similar feeling come over me and immediately knew there was unfinished business awaiting me. Although at that time I did not know it, the Paris story had begun the day before in Lake Lucerne, Switzerland. A friend and I were on a 10-day bus tour of Europe. I was totally enjoying the tour, having fun with the people, the sights we were seeing. And when we arrived in Lake Lucerne, our guide had us up and on our tour bus extra early, and we arrived at a small lake outside the city. The mist was still hanging over it as the sun was slowly finding this part of the world. As we looked over the lake, we were looking at a lion carved into the side of a cliff. The lion was crying and had a sword protruding out of its side. As our guide told the story regarding this memorial, I found myself weeping. I thought I was weeping because the lion looked so sad. Little did I know it was the beginning of a bigger story. The story our guide told us was this. The Swiss had armies that had rented out to protect the royalty of Europe. The motto of these soldiers was never surrender. 800 of these soldiers were assigned to King Louis of France. When the people of France rebelled against the king, he did not think his people would hurt him, so he told the soldiers to lay down their arms. This resulted with all 800 soldiers being killed. These soldiers lived by a creed of never surrender, yet as they were soldiers, they had to follow orders, therefore surrendered and were killed. The lion sculpture was a memorial for these 800 Swiss men. The rest of the day was memorable. I'm just rearranging the paper here. The rest of the day was memorial. I forgot all about weeping. We went up into the Alps and the clouds parted for us, giving the feeling of being on top of the world with the beautiful vista of the Alps all around, plus the magical sound of cowbells floating up through the clouds below to add to the magic. Our guide advised us we were really lucky as the clouds only cleared 3 or 4 days a year, and usually tourists were up there in the clouds and did not get to experience the Alps as we were. Early the next morning, we were up on our bus heading to Paris. As the bus approached Paris, I began to feel unsettled. This feeling I had not felt since San Francisco, so I knew something was up. As we checked into our hotel room, we only had time to freshen up, for we had to leave for a drive around the Arc de Triomphe, and we had some food and got into open boats for the sunset trip down the Seine River. We boarded the boats with many others, perhaps 150 to 200 people. As the boats sailed down the river, all of a sudden, I found myself sobbing, not just weeping, sobbing. I turned to my friend and asked, "Are we anywhere near where those 800 men were killed?" She answered she did not think so, but I knew different. We were passing the backside of the Louvre. As the boat passed and we left the Louvre area, my sobbing subsided and I was able to enjoy the sunset, the Eiffel Tower, and the original Statue of Liberty. That inside, all I wanted to do was get back to my hotel room and work with this unsettled feeling, which had reduced me to sobbing. I knew from experience that this had been triggered from a past life, and it was unresolved sadness, and I needed to transform it. As I sat on the bed in the hotel room, I told my friend I was going to do some inner processing. And as I regressed myself into the feeling of unease, I was one of the 800 soldiers, and that my brother, who is my daughter in this life, was there with me. The horror we felt of being told to put down our arms, and the rabble, as I thought of them, coming in and systematically killing us one by one. What history does not report is how they picked up our rifles and bludgeoned us with them. And as we watched, we knew we would be next, and there was nothing we could do about it. We were soldiers and had been given an order, and we had to obey. No one gave another order, and thus we all died without honor. We had been ordered to surrender, which was against our code. As I sat on the bed with tears streaming down my face, I realized that it was the dishonor which was needing to be forgiven and released. I brought in the transforming, connecting light and released the energy from that life and then from my body in this one. As I completed, I realized there was something else. I did not feel the peace I would normally feel. And I breathed into this new unsettling energy I was feeling, and another life popped in. I was a small man, a pickpocket, and I was running away from the policeman. He lifted his rifle, he shot and hit me in the back around the shoulders. I fell down dead. As I brought the transforming light into this life and released the shock, and then once again concentrating on my own body, I rebalanced my energies in the light. This time I was complete. I was back in the present, relaxed and contented, feeling peaceful. And from then on, I did not experience any disquieting feelings while visiting Paris. I've been fortunate in being able to see many cities in my life, some in Europe and around North America, New Zealand, Australia, Fiji, Singapore, a lot of them. But nothing have I experienced, but San Francisco was the first one. As I said, 1987. The next disquieting whenever I've been in a setting was Paris. Now, there was a lot of years in between. But the question comes up as to how much do we get triggered by things that we may have an emotional reaction that we don't really consider or think about, only to discover that really they were triggered by a memory in the body or a soul or whatever you want to call it about another time period. I am ever thankful that I learned how to do past life regressions, and I did the majority of the early ones by myself. I didn't have a leader once I learned how to do them. And then I went on to have done many, many workshops with people. Understanding that you have lived in another time, and I do want to deviate a little bit here. As time went on, I began to realize that people had future lives as well. And the first time that happened was I was leading a past life regression in my own living room one time. This is very early. And then usually I would give the instruction to go to a past life that represented. And this time I just said, go to a life. And this one lady went way into the future. And I had to sit down and think about that because I'm not repudiating her experience. And she had quite a story, and we did the usual integration, letting the energies go and integrating the light into the body now. And it's like I began to realize more and more. Another time, and I know I've spoken to this before, I was doing a past life regression for a small group, and one person was looking very stunned and said, "Well, I was in 3000 and something or other. I can't remember the actual little bit. And I was And actually the story was there that he was in a spaceship that crashed. And he had to assimilate back into, because he couldn't get off Earth. He had to. So there were a lot of little stories like that where people were all of a sudden in another time and place, or had crashed in their spacecraft or had done this or that. But they were future. So over time, I began to realize the timelines, and I realized then how I used to teach about past life regression was that I drew different timelines, and I would also put on a certain line, a future life. But we're here in this life, and how we deal and work with this life. And what do the situations come forth? Because right now, in some instances, there's a certain amount of repression and not allowed to do this and not allowed to do that. And so if you get triggered with some of that by anger or frustration and anything else, is because you no doubt at some time have had something similar where you have been impeded from doing what you want to do or going where you want to go. We often, just in our general lives, consider that we have been alive in another time, in another place. And the decisions that we make then affect the decisions that we make today. Many of you who have listened to the show will have heard me say that the very beginning decisions we make, major decisions, are usually made by the time we're 2.5. But they're all past life experiences. And I say past life because I've talked about past life, but any life, where somewhere you've made a strong decision when you encounter the emotion that created that decision, you remake it. So many of us live our lives based on decisions that we have made from another time period. And now we're bringing it into this life. And unless we know how to change and transform those decisions, preferably from back then as well as here, then what happens, we keep going. It's like a little Ferris wheel going around. We just keep going on. And some of those decisions come back quite frequently. Other ones, we may not have them for a number of years. So it's really about becoming aware of how you are in the feeling level and what's happening and what's taking place. But for me, I spent a lot of years exploring past lives. I had to, years later, go back, and I should explain something here. When I first learned from the first two teachers that taught me two different techniques, they did not do any transformation work. And so all the early lives that I had, I remembered them, but they weren't, because they weren't transformed. And years later, when I began to realize how important the transforming of the death process and how important that was, and how the transformation was, that I began to go back and I had to transform all my early memories. A lot of my past lives today, I do not remember because they were transformed. And so the moment of death is a great time for transforming something, and then you can bring that energy in and remove it from you here now as well. So, but all my early lives, and I have a number of really interesting ones. I'm just going to look back, and I'm just going to again talk about some of the lives that I had. Okay, this is just a couple of them. I'm an Amish girl. I am 15 and in love with a 19-year-old boy who lives down the road. My parents want me to marry another boy who is 16. I run away with the 19-year-old. We end up on the frontier in Kentucky, building and living in a log cabin. A couple of years pass and we have a little girl. I am happy. We are working hard and life seems full. Then one day, a small band of Native Indians come and attack us, and we all die. All of us die at some point or other. That's one of the things that you become interested in. Another one was, I'm a seaman in the South Pacific Seas. My ship goes down and I somehow survive and live with natives on an island. For several years, I am content and happy. Then one day I'm out fishing with them on the reef when I slip and gash my leg. It turns into gangrene. There is no axe or any other sharp object to cut it off, and I die in a lot of pain. I wrote down here, these are two of the early past lives which I remembered over the years because I did not know about transforming the energy and consequently just viewed them, not released them. Also, I would use them as example in my lectures when I began speaking on reincarnation and past lives, and therefore become a part of a different memory bank. Once I began to use the light to transform my past experience, past lives, and the energy in this one, I do not remember all the different lives I have experienced. I do know I experienced lives in Egypt and Europe, plus many other different parts of the world. The more I saw, the more I understood about myself and how I was responding to the world now. Now, these are little stories, but they carry impact, what decisions that you made, what feelings that you had that transcend time and space. You are more than just here. You are more than this blood and flesh and bone and blood and all the things that we have in our minds, but we carry this information all over our body in different parts of us. We carry the elements, but there's also an energy in the universe. I call it the love source energy that is there, that when we have something, we can let go. And we can release it. And we not only can release it from another time period, we can release it now in this time, any time we want. Love transforms all things. By putting love to it, the energy has to transform because it's absolutely without judgment, without anything. It's just a beautiful, it's like when we have in a dark room, we turn the light on, the light then transform the dark into light. That's exactly the same thing that happens when we come to love and we see it. It's like a light. Now that's when I'm working with the death process, and I will talk about that again another day. That's when we learned how to transform through the death process and regressions. When I was doing regressions and we come to the last day and find out all this information, we're able to bring the light in. And when we bring the light in, the person, whether it's yourself or someone else, can let it go and free up, so that then if you had a memory of anything, it's attached to you today. So then you can find that energy in you now and where you store it. And then people say, oh, I store it in my heart. But there's so many other places that you can store it besides just the heart. Although the heart often does carry a lot of this, but it's not the only place. And so it's really important to be able to recognize how you can clear what you want to clear. And no, I just wanted you to know today, based on something asked me about, did the new babies coming into this world, was it karma that they were coming into at this time with what was facing them coming up? And I talked about how I discovered that people often chose their parents, or didn't choose their parents, I should say, because they didn't look. I was showing a lesson, I guess you could say, one night, many, many years ago. There's all these sparks of light. And it was like I was standing, I had a teacher, an unworldly teacher for a lot of years. And we were standing looking at all these lights going on and off. And I'm going, what are all these lights? And he said, that is the conceptions that are taking place that have all the information of the possibility of that life. And then the souls go to that. And I've seen that happen where I have just seen a light and zeroed in on it. And I watched these souls zeroing in on different lives. And then when I was working with them during another process that I have on freezing, where we're frozen and stuck in time, what we found was people didn't always check where they were being born. And in another book I've written about this, but it's really about understanding that sometimes people don't look ahead as to what they're diving into. And sometimes they awaken going, where am I? I'm not supposed to be here. What is this? And unfortunately, when you're conceived and when you're born, most of us can't get out of the ride. We're on a ride. We just have to stay with that ride for as long as that ride goes. And so that's what makes this life so interesting. Where did we come from? What experiences have we had? What have we brought with us? What are we living now with decisions we've made maybe millennia ago? And now we're confronted and we're making decisions that affect our lives now. That is the gloriousness of being alive on planet Earth, in an emotional planet where we get to explore and to know. And as far as I'm concerned, we need to clear and be at one if there are feelings and your emotions in order to leave. If you want to live on, a lot of people used to me, oh, I just want this to be my last life. I'm tired of this. Is then you need to really come to terms with your feelings as well as you possibly can. That's my mythology, maybe not yours, but that's what I really feel is very, very important. Am I always clear on my feelings? No, but I'm pretty good at acknowledging them and being miserable if I'm miserable, happy when I'm happy, and understanding that I'm one with the light and all is well and can be let go. Well, I think that is my talk for today. I wish you well. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for listening. I also want to thank you for your subscriptions and for your comments, and also for the other two little shows I have, the Sunday Thought and Mental Mind Treatments, which is live on Mondays at 7 p.m. where you can also email me or text me what you would like me to do a mental mind treatment for you. There you can see how prayer and psychic can work together. I want to thank you, wish you well, enjoy, and have a great day.